We hit hard daily exercise sets together. Every day we're grinding it out. Join us, get ripped, get healthy, and most importantly, be consistent. The only way you can be without fail, which is having a team of people doing it with you. Contact us through the email on the screen to get started.
Welcome to Joy Tank. We are going to be doing a little bit different of a style than we normally do. We're going to hit a couple of topics. We're going to, right off the bat, hit dragons. We're going to talk about the microbiome. We're going to hit COVID. It's over. What would we have done differently? And we're going to talk about some underrated adulting skills. But first, the news. Today, Tyler and I were talking off camera, off recording, about some of the DEI initiatives that large companies are turning away from. And so we thought that that is an interesting moment in history to kind of highlight because we could see that the companies and the politics and kind of societal norms were trending in kind of that left direction, and there was quite a bit of resistance to it. And recently, a couple of companies have announced that they're going to step away from doing DEI initiatives. DEI is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And the point of it is to kind of bring up people who are underserved in the community and give them an opportunity, which on the surface, there sounds like there's nothing more American than that, you know, ultimately. But what becomes an issue is when you are not hiring someone who is most qualified for the job, when you are then hiring them because they are a minority or because they
Is timer on?
Underprivileged.
Timer on.
Timer's on.
The best time for DEI, you know, I think where we were really practicing it correctly as a nation, it was just a beautiful time, is the late 1950s, where we were really going through and making sure there were enough bathrooms for Black people, you know, even equal to the amount of bathrooms we had for white people. I bring that up as a joke, but honestly, I think the DEI, there's great things it does, but then it also leads you into, you know, compellingly racist and sexist thinking, where you are very ironically looping around. So I kind of think of it as a correction, but it's also an overcorrection. And I think it's more than anything, just really tricky waters trying to enforce and trying to force companies and media companies to do this. And at the end of the day, companies are going to start losing money because everybody who's consuming the media and, you know, for DEI is aware that there's forced castings and things like that are happening, where they're changing races of characters from when they're doing movie rebrands and stuff like that. Everybody's aware that the Little Mermaid is Black now, which is fine. And I'm not saying that I'm not saying that as in a disparaging way. I'm just saying everybody's openly aware of it. And so it makes it, it takes you out of the enjoyment of that consumption. Everybody knows that it's kind of on the nose. And I think the correction has been made in a number of ways. And I think people kind of hate it now. They're losing money. I mean, that's just the bottom line. It's the capitalist free market. The people are losing money, so they're shifting away. What's interesting to me, I think everybody knows that's obvious. What's interesting to me is that the Democratic is the Democratic Party in the same kind of a way, because they're losing people. Are they going to shift away from DEI, which reveals that it wasn't a value? It wasn't even really connected to a real value. It was a ploy to win over people, which I think political parties do. I think particularly the GOP and the DNC do that. You know, is the Democratic Party going to, and if we see them over the course of the next year, steer away from DEI in the same way that these companies are? That is strangely revealing, I think, and of disingenuousness.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that if you set up parameters for needing to hire a certain amount of people based on their gender or their race, you are then excluding people based on their gender or their race, which is not fair. And I understand that equity is exactly that. It's supposed to not be fair. It's supposed to kind of tip the scale against what naturally is occurring. So I understand why I think there's an importance, like Martin Luther King Jr. said, to judge people by the content of their character and not by their skin. And so pushing for that is super important. But you see, just like you were saying, where the scales get tipped so much, where um, Asian um, applicants to universities are being denied, and these Asian applicants have really high test scores in lieu of allowing minorities with lower test scores into these colleges. And so that's, in my opinion, a complete injustice, because you're allowing people who aren't the best and don't have the best test scores to enter in, where they're basically taking the place of somebody else who has worked hard to earn that position. 30 seconds left on the clock. Any final thoughts?
I think in some ways I kind of enjoy, although I call it disingenuous, I think the truth is that political parties are supposed to change over time according to the wishes of the people that are, who are their members. If there was any idealism to political parties of them being a good thing, which I think they largely are evil things, but if they were a good thing, they would serve democracy and serve the wishes of their members and express the wishes of their members, much like a republic and elected officials. I think what is strange is when parties make a concerted effort to stand for something that and most everybody kind of falls in line with it. And I think DEI is one of those things where it's become a really mixed issue. I'm not saying I'm completely anti. I think it's like great now there's more female superheroes and things like that, but it's become a political effort and it's failing. And now it's kind of revealing that there's a need to shift away. And I think what's weird is that they're like a business losing money and are now via the force of free market having to shift away from that. There's a part of that I find kind of odd, but then there's a part of it that I feel that is, I think, kind of just if something's not working, shift away from it. But
yeah, and I think it's good to see it correct course now rather than as we're farther down and more derailed off the track. Speaking of derailed off the track, our timer's up and we are moving on to dragons. Recently in Joe Rogan's podcast, he was talking about the possibility of dragons being real. The ladies of the show The View lost their mind about this and are very upset about Joe Rogan discussing this possibility. So we're going to carry the torch from here. Tyler Stone, are dragons real?
100% they could be. I'd like them to be without having to open up the whole biblical can of worms. 100%. Genesis 3, etc. I think The View is a joke. I think this is a continuation of an effort to sort of attack and demonize Joe Rogan. And the truth being that he has, no one can really argue with the fact that he has like quintuple the reach that Joy and any of those women in the entire show The View have, like quintuple or probably like 10x. I don't even know. You can look at the numbers. Has a significantly greater influence than they do, which is ironic because I think we're still in this transition where we view them as this like official publication because they're on cable TV. But the truth is he has a much larger audience. I'm just kind of taken aback that like out of all the things that are really weird that Joe Rogan has said, that's the thing that's the strangest to them that they're going to make fun of him for. They're not going to make fun of him for thinking that like monkeys ate psychedelic mushrooms and that's what turned into humans, or various alien beliefs, or
and originally not believing that we landed on the moon and still kind of also being on the fence about whether we to this day have landed on the moon. He's got a lot of views that are quite out there, but I think this one is just trending, and this is probably one that the producers of the show of The View can throw down in front of the ladies and say, hey, that guy who got a bunch of views when Trump was on his show, this is how weird he is. Why don't we discuss how non-credible this is as a source? This guy believes in dragons, and what's more ridiculous than that? He just said it yesterday, but what's interesting to me is that so many cultures have dragons throughout a vast span of history, everywhere from England to Asia. And we also, what's interesting as well is the historical accounts of other creatures, especially in the England area, like in the art, the tapestries and things like that, unicorns side by side with dragons. Not that I think that necessarily unicorns ever existed, but it's just interesting to see that dragons have been embedded in our histories for so long, and also embedded in cultures that are very separate. You've got Japanese dragons, Chinese dragons, English dragons, and they're different. Sometimes they're winged, sometimes they have four legs, sometimes they have none. There's a diversity to them, but they're definitely a common mythos in the human experience. And our next guest, when we have Jordan Peterson on, he can give us a full breakdown of the histories of what the symbology.
Dude, he talks about dragons so much. I love
dragons,
it. I don't have any problem sort of suspending my belief and imagining, that 500 years ago or 1,000 years ago, or hidden in a cave somewhere, or 2,000 years ago or whatever, that there were dragons walking around, or even unicorns. I really don't have any issue with it. For those that do, I would just say, if you have an issue with it, you probably are an evolutionist. And I would just posit that aren't there species alive today that were clearly derivatives of species alive 50 billion years ago or whatever, when in the Cretaceous period? However many billions or millions that is. I don't bother trying to learn those numbers because they're, I think, pretty irrelative. There are alligators, and there are Komodo dragons, and there are a number of like reptilian species and underwater species where like these have been around, like these species types survived the extinction events that we are theorizing happened, that or multiples of them or whatever, that like made the dinosaurs extinct, right? But some species made it through. We also know that like tons of species have gone extinct over the course of the last 10,000 years of human written history. So where you draw the line in history as far as where dinosaurs stopped existing, and from a certain perspective, they never did. There's just very few species around, but tons of species have gone extinct under human existence over the course. I mean, bison almost went extinct. You know what I mean? Dodo birds.
Another great example is woolly mammoths, because the Native Americans in North America hunted woolly mammoths, and they are now extinct and have been extinct on the human spectrum a long time, but the overlap was there. And so
yes.
if woolly mammoths were incorporated into fairy tales and stories and lore and legends as much as whatever dragons are, we would have just as much disbelief, other than we found remnants of woolly mammoths, And if dragons are this so much of a rare lizard species that did exist many thousands of years ago, the idea that potentially we could unearth something that is proof of their once not that distant existence would be, really interesting, and could legitimately happen, as there's all sorts of things, all the
my personal concept is probably, I think it's very unlikely that actual dragons are fire breathing. I think what's far more likely is that something like, I think there was at least one species of, can imagine the year 900. There are Vikings, it is medieval, there are castles in England, like that's the time period, plus tons of indigenous, cultures all over the earth. And in China's like in this golden age, all these things are happening here, plopped in the year 900. Imagine that pterodactyls still exist in really small numbers, but they exist. They would be, can you imagine being like a medieval knight in England and seeing a pterodactyl, or hearing of peasants' descriptions of a pterodactyl? Pterodactyls were like 20 feet long, sometimes 30 feet long. Like if you go look at pterodactyl skeletons and stuff, these were not small. They were flying, they had giant beaks. Knowing humans and how the human game of telephone goes, you'd be hearing about fire breathing pretty quickly, and probably like poison fangs and all sorts of stuff. So I think that it's very conceivable. And then 100% they would get hunted down by men with axes and pikes very quickly.
Yeah,
and that's
even
an
the
English myth.
potential of during the Crusades when English knights were making their way all the way down to the Middle East and them coming across, a crocodile or an alligator, crocodiles in the Nile type of situation, and reporting back, yeah, we've seen, there's dragons in Egypt, I don't see that as being completely implausible.
Yeah, agreed.
All right, next topic. So we've solved that mystery. The microbiome. What is it? And could you possibly have one? Um,
The microbiome is a blanket term for the living flora and microbes and the microscopic creatures that make up the composition of the inside of a human. Most specifically, your microbiome, like kind of generally, is referring to your digestive tract. However, it's a big, large new area of study. Kind of, it's like a bleeding edge of health research, because it's extremely difficult to study because you're limited to you can't just open up and like check out what's going on in somebody's like middle intestines, and that's where there have been enough studies though to find that there's huge links between the gut and the brain and cognitive function, like significant, to the point where it's like, wow, like 99% of a person is actually just the functionality of these microbes. Your moods, hormone functionality, all these things are like hugely connected to your digestive health, basically. But also, in your ears and in your nose, and even like topical areas are like extremely bacteria rich in a good way. And then things like over cleaning, antibiotics, things like that will, and chemicals use in general, destroy microbes in these various areas. And then that sets the stage for a lot of disease to come to the surface. So that's the term microbiome is really just kind of a term to refer to that entire world of things.
Yeah, and so one of the things that I think is really interesting about the microbiome is it's kind of had its association with kooky science, medical science in the past, so that
Yeah.
makes it easy to write it off because as medical science comes back around to the reality of and importance of some of these things that have
They're
been
like, oh, like that was just something that guy Dr. Oz was talking about, right?
yeah, or even early 1900s. And I even today it blows my mind, but there's still electric shock therapy that's used. It's used a lot more specific, but One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest is where they were basically frying people. And now science has come a lot farther and they use it a lot more specific and a lot more technical to help the brain kind of maintain or create good electrical currents in the brain. And I think the microbiome is similar to that. And I have seen some articles where people are paying for the intestinal microbiome of some like athletes. And
100%, yeah. Because it turns one huge thing that has come out is that when we think metabolism, like there are some people who are skinny no matter what they do, and there are some people who put on weight very easily, even if they kind of do everything right. One wrong meal and they've put on a couple pounds, whereas like this person over here is rail thin, even if they're eating McDonald's every meal or whatever. Obviously, their internal health gets really jacked up, but it's like, and the doctors just, the scientists have always just gone, oh, that's just the metabolism, it's genetic. Well, I mean, there's a lot of huge studies and takeaways going on right now, but this one is fascinating. Turns out metabolism is not, well, it is genetic, but it's not genetic in terms of it's in your genes. Metabolism is measurable in the microbiome. So like it's in the composition and interactions of species and imbalances of species, of specific types of species that are in the gut. And when you have a child, your microbiome composition of each parent kind of gets passed on, just like the genes do. So your kids end up being a composition of you and your spouse, and or whoever raised them. So they've even done microbiome studies on like foster or like adopted kids, and they found they're like, wow, like they're seeing flora composition of the genetic parents, but much less so. What mostly takes over is the environmental parents.
So it's more nature over nurture in that case.
Your microbiome 100% is, because like 90/10, because it's mostly having to do with what you consume and what you touch, like by and large. And so, yeah, if anybody has an interest in it, first of all, just eat more fermented foods. 100%. That's like every time you eat a fermented food, you are basically taking like a little microscopic fleet of greyhounds with like random immigrants and moving them in like a good way. Like it's a good thing to have more types of species. It's a good thing to try new weird kinds of food. And specifically, it's a great thing to eat fermented food because in the case of the gut, unlike Mexico and America, you want as many people as possible from other countries and other species. You want as many as possible in your gut in order for your gut to thrive. Diversity is the ultimate foundational value in terms of gut microbes. So I mean, you'll see it. There's a ton of health benefits that come from just eating raw and fermented things, and it's all specifically because of that.
Yeah, and ultimately stay away from the things that we know are not good. Oily food and soda.
Seed oily food and sugary soda.
Yeah. And then our next topic, moving from microbiome, staying in the vein of health, but going to COVID. We never had a COVID is over episode. We had a couple of things that we had recorded in the midst of COVID, or right at the tail end of COVID, but ultimately in reflection to what we would have done differently. And even looking at some of like the messages that I had going on with people during COVID, had conversations with people all the way on the far, far right, where it was, buy as much ammo as you can and get bottled water. And then, on the far left, where if you and everyone you know isn't vaccinated, then you're an evil person. So in hindsight, looking back, most of us in the construction industry locally here in Central Oregon did get vaccinated. Most of the people that I know around here got vaccinated. For you guys, we did not vaccinate our kids, but my wife and I both got vaccinated. I didn't do any boosters. I just did the Johnson & Johnson, one and done. I have not had any notable health side effects from that. I have not had any more children since I got vaccinated, but I think that has to do more with the vasectomy than the vaccination.
That's fair. That's a fair assessment, I would say.
And for you guys, what do you think that you would have done differently in the midst of the pandemic?
I think, we did not get vaccinated.
Turns out that was a good choice.
Well, now I think that people who were not vaccinated got a little bit of a better feeling sort of afterwards, because there's just so much changing information coming out about the vaccines and what they would do and what you can expect. It was a very confusing time. Like, you can certainly say that. It was a confusing time it was a scary time to operate a business. I mean, I think it was scary if you had a job, but it was much scarier if you were running a business of just about any kind. I mean, there's specific industries that literally got destroyed just because of COVID, that they still don't exist anymore. Or they've been extremely and extraordinarily hampered and are now rebuilding. I don't know. I think, unfortunately, one huge takeaway that the entire country has had, fortunately, unfortunately, I mean, in some ways is a good thing, is just massive distrust for the government. I don't feel like that's an opinion. I feel like it's a fact. I think that both sides of the political spectrum and everyone in the middle just kind of generally kind of went, So it was kind of a cleansing, I think. I actually really appreciate COVID from a social perspective. I think it was maybe a needed wake up call. Going through a process of listening to your news sources, of which there are many, but pretty much all of them were wrong in multiple ways, multiple times throughout the whole process. So like every human being in America basically got to experience their media being wrong, sounding right, but being wrong. And then got to realize, when you're friends with someone and they're caught in a lie and then you watch them cover up the lie with another kind of like sort of just as weird sounding fabrication. And then like a couple months later, that turns out to be a fabrication. And then they kind of make another one. You're like, wow, I don't trust this person anymore. You know what I mean? The way that they're not humble, they don't understand how to be corrected at all. So I don't think I can trust them when they sound confident now because they're just making things up. Everybody realized that about the news, about all sides of the news, and a lot of editorial kind of stuff, a lot of influencers and talking heads. I feel like COVID was kind of the death of trusting the talking heads. Great band, but you know what I mean? And I think that from that perspective, COVID was just it's like a colon cleanse. You just got to do it. Everybody's just got to do it. It's not fun, but we got to do it.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Because I tend to internalize big questions like that. And I think for me, if COVID had the next type of pandemic that comes around, I'm going to be a lot less sensitive to the demands of the government. I will still be respectful to people. Like I wouldn't go into an old lady's house and be like, I'm going to do construction here and I'm not going to wear a mask.
Right.
I would still, obviously be respectful to people on a one-on-one basis. But there was a lot of, like you said, fear and unknown, and I handled that pretty well. But I think ultimately just not worrying about it as much as I did, and I think that's why it's important to kind of have a little bit of not only some savings saved up so that you're financially kind of prepared, but also having, a little bit of water saved up, some food saved up. So you're a little more insulated from some of those things, having a generator, kind of just the prepper things, but just the basic level, nothing like super crazy, which we already were. And fortunately in Oregon, construction never got closed down, which I'm super, super thankful for. Had construction not been considered a necessary business, I think potentially we would have moved to another state. And I know a lot of people around this area that did move to Idaho and Texas and Tennessee and more conservative states that were a lot more open with and less restrictive, less government enforcing.
I know the timer just went off, but gosh darn it. That was the element of things that got really dystopian. That I think mostly, if somebody feels like it was totally reasonable for the government to decide who was a needed worker and who was vital and what businesses were vital and what weren't, if you feel like that was fair, you've never owned a business, because like literal entire small business industries got destroyed. Like multi-generation, like movie theaters went out of business in every state. Like just to name one, because guess what? Like it was impossible to initially, or in the middle of it, it was impossible to comply with the spacing requirements and the like job site requirements that to allow people in. But then a month later, those all changed. And so then it's like, oh, we've been shut for a month without and so there was this huge amount of and so I guess I understand the thought of well, we need to keep people safe. And so it's okay to be totalitarian if we're trying to save lives, because, the risk, and reward of that, we just had to make a decision. If we got something like the Spanish flu, but we didn't have something like the Spanish flu, we didn't have anywhere near the numbers. So, but we thought that we did. And so, okay, so if the government thinks that there's something bad enough that can kill enough people, can they just become totalitarian in terms of dictating what kind of businesses are allowed to be open? In literal Third Reich kind of level of government control, North Korea level government control, for people to, again, I think that if you were an employee, that was an easier pill to swallow. If you're being told that your multi-generation family business now is going to have to go into loads of debt, like, because there was no checks going out to businesses until like a year and a half later at the soonest, like the PPP loans that came out. I got a PPP loan, it was 2 years later. So it's like, it sure is great that I figured out how to
Manage your business through that. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on, because the more we talk about this and the more I think about it, the more frustrated I get. So we can really do an entire episode about this, because I definitely, as we're talking, I'm just thinking about how irritating and how passionate I am about so much of it. So we're going to move on. Lots of thoughts there.
Next week we'll talk about 1984 and we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, 1984. Yeah, exactly. It's funny, and the right likes to use 1984 quite a bit as an analogy for the left, but I did hear somebody on the left, I can't remember who it was talking about how the right was being like 1984, and I found it hilarious. It's definitely the kettle calling the pot black for sure. So
yeah, it's hard. Well, it's hard to say, though. I think it depends. I know we need to switch topics, but if it's something to think about. If George W. Bush had been president instead of Joe Biden, like if it was George W. Bush's actual administration handling COVID, I don't know if it had been that. It's an interesting thought. You know what I mean? It's all ifs, ands, and buts, though. Like Joe Biden was the one who brought in the mandates, and I think that people trying to defend his actions would say, well, everybody else would have done that. Trump would have inevitably done that if he had won again. And I don't know. I don't know, but I think it's a great, if you're a really loyal Democrat, it should be a wake up call, not to turn Republican, but to have a little revolution in your party and stop having tool bags be your candidates.
Ultimately, what the problem is that everybody, the United States got in the family vehicle, and the government is the dad who's driving. And he said, all right, I've checked the brakes. I've checked all the fluids in the vehicle. I've checked the tires for air and their tread. Everybody has your seatbelt on. This is going to be the safest journey possible. And to keep this journey as safe as possible, we will not turn on the engine and we will not drive anywhere. And he goes, well, that doesn't work. We don't get anywhere by doing that. We have to move.
But I also just think on a really base level, when is the government allowed to become totalitarian? Like there needs to be, you know what I mean? Like there needs to be
apparently during a pandemic.
Well, listen, like but it's not a party line thing, because Trump is talking about using the military in America. Not great. Like that's like it's like edging on martial law, right? So
I'm sick and tired of all of our troops having to go overseas. So if we could keep them employed at home, I think that's the best option.
Oh, gotcha. Yeah, that's great. Yeah, more jobs, America first, deploy the military at home. I love it. That's great. Sounds great. Does not sound dystopian in the least bit at all.
They've got these new, I don't know, have you seen the new uniforms? They're all white and they have helmets that they wear. Yeah. Oh, Trump has a really cool black one he's going to wear. It's pretty sweet. JD Vance's is bright red. I don't know what's going on with that. Anyway, underrated adulting skills.
Yes, topic 5. Let's do this.
I've got a couple of notes that I wrote down. I think one of the number one issues that is underrated, yet it is something that everybody knows that they need to do, and it's something that everybody says #adulting or they complain about, but is living on a balanced budget. If you can get your finances under control and live like a mature, responsible adult, it sets you up for success for your later life, and it truly does have a snowball effect, and your habits help your finances, and all you're ultimately doing is deciding where you're making sure that your priorities are taken care of first, which is the most boring and adult thing to do, and you're only spending the money that you make. And by doing that, you can not only create wealth for your retirement, but you can create generational wealth by just managing your own dang money. So I think that is so underrated, and it's so important. And we don't really teach finance and personal finance, business finance, or taxes in school, or banking in school nearly as much as we should. It's not required courses, and they should be. And so I think if you can get your finances under control, then you are going to be set up for life. I think that is of most of the people that I see that are in older age, one of the biggest issues, second to health, would be just managing their finances responsibly. If you can get
Yeah.
that as a habit early, it's so helpful for the long term. And then you got one, or I was going to jump into health.
I was going to say, one of my, I agree with that completely. So this is not antithetical to that, although I have a specific financial bend. So this would be sort of the equivalent of like stockpile cash. So it's a specific financial strategy. It's all kind of, to me, under the umbrella of have intentionality with your budget and understand where your money is going, because only then can you make real, actual decisions with weight behind them of where your money is going to go. I think one huge underrated adulting skill for many young adults now is just managing lots of credit cards. I think it's a great thing, and I think it's become negative in our culture. But one of the most do or die methods of having a really balanced budget is having a number of credit cards and using credit cards actively every month and having them zeroed out, by the 20th every month. It's a massive way to build credit, and it forces you to be completely overdraft fees are not an option because it's not an overdraft fee. If you're managing builds with credit cards and you don't do the math right, you're going to pay 25% interest, which is absolutely criminal. But if you're managing 10 credit cards and you're using 2 of them extraordinarily regularly and you're zeroing everything out before the end of every month, so you're not spending more than what you have, your credit will, it's the only way to get to 800 credit. It's actually like the way to get to 800 credit. Paying your bills on time and, paying off cars is all great, but managing credit cards well is what opens up more doors for you in the world of credit.
And what I'm going to state for the listeners that you did hit.
Nathaniel hated hearing all of that.
No. I did not at all. Step 1, get your finances in order. Step 2, have some cash first. Step 3, get credit cards. Because if you don't have any cash on hand, you have not proven that you can save money. So step 1 is work the muscle habit of saving money. Step 2, then go out and get yourself a credit card. And don't get 6 all at once. Get one, manage that for a few months, get a second one, manage that. Because I think what can happen is people can end up upside down by getting too many credit cards and not using them responsibly. And so if you slowly, maturely use them responsibly.
That is true. And so I would never, because I know people who have, and I agree with you. I just got credit cards, and the without having cash in hand or managing my money well or knowing, and it was the use of credit cards that prompted our intentionality of money, because we got a rewards card at Chase, who have the best credit cards generally speaking, other than American Express. Chase has the best. So, cards with bonuses and such. So we opened up a card there.
Brought to you by Chase.
And yeah, they're our sponsors. It's pretty cool. The fear of the 25% interest and the insane levels of payments and the knowledge that was dinging my credit was so great for me and Joelle that it really kicked us into gear. So I guess I would say alternatively, you can just get a credit card and start using it. But you just need to have the fear of God in you, the fear of credit destruction in you, because the minute you realize that you're not organized enough to zero out a credit card that month, like the next day, it doesn't do you any credit good by holding balances on cards. It does you bad. You need to listen to people with 800 credit. They'll tell you to zero out cards as quickly as possible. Use them a lot, but zero them out immediately. Like at the end of the day, pay the card off with your debit account. If you can't do that, the very first month that you go over, you should probably just cut your credit card out, because you're not ready for it, or maybe on the like that. It's going to happen. You're going to carry over a balance, and it should terrify you, and it should force you into some structure. And if that's the way you learn, because that's the way I learn, I learn how to swim by reading the manual while falling down the cliff into the ocean, so to speak. Like some people learn more by structure and safety, and some people learn more by experience. If you're a more experiential learner, that's great. Just have some fail safes for yourself. And if you can't zero out on the second month, cut them up,
That's great advice. Yeah, that's really good. Moving on to my second underrated adulting skill would be taking care of your health. And I think as you are in the age where you've got a career that you're building, you're working on, paying down your mortgage, and you've got kids that need to go to ballet and soccer practice, it's easy for you to put health at the bottom of your priority list. And I think my advice to anyone listening, because you can start getting healthy literally today, would be put your health as a priority, because unlike your finances, you can, to quite an extent, you can fix your finances. Some of the health issues that you have, if you get to a point that's so far gone, some things you are very difficult to come back from, if not impossible. So if you're getting to the point where you're obesely overweight, the wear and tear on your joints, the or if you're drinking a lot of alcohol, the damage it does to your organs, if you're smoking all the time, the damage that's doing to your lungs, if you're eating terrible food that is specifically not heart healthy food, that's wrecking your heart, arteries, and veins, that's not good. So getting your diet and getting a workout routine mixed into your life is so critical. And I think most of the people that you and I look up to have some sort of physical routine that they maintain. Most of the guys that grab our ear that we're listening to are these guys who have dialed that in for a very long time. And I think it has a completely underrated effect on the rest of your life that you just don't really realize until it becomes a normal routine. It's so important.
I 100% agree. We have to wrap, but this is a perfect tie-in brought to you by Joy Tank Fitness Program. Join us. It's awesome. By the way, we have to lay out. I've been on a 2-day break now, but I plan on starting up full tomorrow. December's 30-day plan. So you've already been going though. You're doing burpees and crap.
I have a great workout partner who literally throws a fit if we do not work out. On Sunday night, he was absolutely distraught that I was telling him it was rest day, and he was furious.
Kidding.
So it's good. He's a great partner. We're watching Seal.
8-year-old boys have a lot of testosterone pumping through their body, like needs an outlet, and that's awesome.
Yeah, it's good. Watching Seal 2, 3, 4 class on YouTube. It's like it was a Discovery Channel mini series. And so he's very also adding on to the Jocko Willink aspect. He's very into the workout. So for this month, we're going just completely balls to the walls, and we are doing 100 burpees, 100 push-ups, and 100 body squats all on the same day. And we're just working them out. And it is rough, but it's good. And I am very excited to see how we are feeling at the end of December, because the first month in October, when we were doing 100 push-ups, getting through that 100 push-ups was no joke. Like, that was legit. Like, when I was pushing myself, I was getting out of breath. My arms were sore the next day. And so now mixing in 100 squats, 100 burpees, and 100 push-ups, the push-ups are like the easy part. I go, oh man, I can't do another burpee. Time to do 25 push-ups.
Yeah.
So it's awesome to start to get fitter, and it's fun bonding with your kid, looking at him doing push-ups, telling him, get your butt up in the air, so it's good. So join us if you want to join this team. Imaginary Secretary Jeff at gmail.com.
We just need to start a Discord. I think that's what we need to do. And so what I'm doing in December, I love that you guys are doing that. I'm going to do 2 days of 50 perfect push-ups a day. I'm considering stretching that to 60 or 70, because I mean, if not, I'm going to start at 50, but by Christmas, I want to be doing like 70, 75 a day. Perfect push-ups, 2 days in a row, and then 1 day of abs and legs, just to give like one kind of, because I feel like that one October was crazy, but I remember after, doing 100 push-ups a day is great, and then doing 100 push-ups the next day is you're more sore and you're hard, and it's hard and you're pushing through it. On the third day, in a row, it would be like I have a little bit of an injury.
Yeah.
So
Have you been taking a fish oil?
yeah, I'm taking supplements, but I think so for me, 2 days in a row of a real max amount of perfect push-ups is going to be great, and then one day off doing a different muscle group, and then back to 2 days of the push-ups again. Because I like the perfect push-ups because you're engaging your whole body, and it's much harder for
It is
multiple
surprising how much you rely on your core to do a good, keep your body super
Yeah.
flat while
Yeah.
you're doing the push-ups, What I've been doing for the bulk of November, I did 3 servings every day of fish oil, and that has finally been helping my knees,
Nice.
especially doing the burpees, because when we in November tried to do the 100 burpees as one of the workout sets, my knees were not holding up to that. And yesterday, doing 100 burpees and doing
So
the
you
100
taking like triple what it says to take a day?
Yes. Yep.
Nice.
Yeah.
Which
So,
breaks all the supplement rules, but it's just fish oil. Like it's in the diet. Like it's an edible thing. So
and my thought was that if I noticed something weird going on, which I think the only weird side effect would be intestinal. So if I noticed that my stool was becoming super liquid, or if I was breaking out a bunch,
you might
then
just like go keto accidentally,
right. If I noticed any weird side effects, I would dial it back, but I have not. So I've just been doing, and they're just gel capsules. So
Right.
I mean, the difference between taking one and taking 2 more, I think, is the amount of fish oil that's in them has got to be similar to like a sushi meal. It can't. I mean,
Right.
that's not very much
Right.
oil. It's just a natural product. It's not like I'm taking 20,000 milligrams of B12. It's just
Right.
fish oil. So I don't. So far I have had no issues. So I'm going to keep up on the fish oil hardcore. So
Sweet.
my knees are feeling a lot better. I highly recommend it for anybody who has any aching joints. Anybody who is working out should probably be taking a little bit of fish oil at least, or krill oil, one of the two.
Yeah, 100%. All right, that's a wrap. 5 topics. Let's go.
Alrighty. Thanks for watching Joy Tank. We'll catch you on the next one.
Beep.
We hit hard daily exercise sets together. Every day we're grinding it out. Join us, get ripped, get healthy, and most importantly, be consistent. The only way you can be without fail, which is having a team of people doing it with you. Contact us through the email on the screen to get started.